I think we all have that one game, one opponent that we've seen Purdue play, and maybe that game holds a little bit more of a special meaning, or whatever the case might be. There's always going to be a tie to a certain game or a certain team. Maybe it's the first time you were at Ross-Ade Stadium. Maybe it was the best game you've ever seen at Ross-Ade Stadium. Maybe it was the first road game you've ever been on. There are a lot of explanations as to why maybe a specific team or game stands out to you. For me, Purdue Notre Dame is always going to be cream of the crop in terms of the game on the schedule that I look forward to most. Now, this is going to go back to when I was a kid, and my dad, my brother, and I used to go to Purdue games. The first memory I have of the Purdue Notre Dame rivalry, and really my first memory of a Purdue football game at Ross-Ade Stadium, was that 1999 game in West Lafayette when Purdue had a late lead. Notre Dame had the ball at the 3-yard line and couldn't get the final snap off. And I remember it was kind of a back and forth game. That was the game where Drew Brees had that miraculous 2-point conversion where he dove over a Notre Dame defender and kind of, cartwheel's not the right word, somersaulted his way into the end zone. And I just remember, one of the things I remember is when Notre Dame didn't get that final snap off, there were probably 4 or 5 college students sitting in front of us that were just jumping and hugging each other and yelling. And it was quite the scene. So I have a lot of fond memories of the Purdue Notre Dame rivalry, especially at Ross-Ade Stadium. So this game to me is always a lot of fun, and it's really cool. And I understand that, a lot of times going into these games, Purdue has been outmatched, and recent history would tell you that that's been the case, right? Notre Dame has won, I think it's 9 straight. They've won every game that they've played since 2007. Now, obviously, the annual rivalry was halted for a time period. There's no longer that yearly thing. They sign, 6, 8 game contracts now. So it has been dominated by the Fighting Irish recently. And heading into this week's game, that's certainly going to be the case again. Notre Dame obviously is 0-2, but they're still ranked number 24 in the country. And look, I understand why fans are upset about that, right? College football fans look and say, well, they're 0-2 and they're still ranked number 24. They lost a 1-score game to Miami. They lost a 1-score game to Texas A&M. I don't think Notre Dame should be ranked, but I actually get it. I'm not terribly upset with Notre Dame being ranked number 24, even though they don't have a win. It's not like they lost to Miami and then lost to Arkansas. We're lost to Northern Illinois again, right? Like they lost to 2 teams that we think are top 10 quality teams, at least right now. So we'll see. Not only is Notre Dame really talented, but they're obviously going to be really angry heading into this game. They're going to be searching for that first win. So there's a lot of things. This game's going to be at home for them. There's a lot of things that are kind of working in their favor. And you'll remember last year, obviously Purdue was no good last year. They just, plain and simple, to put it straightforward, Purdue was not a good football team last year. So, but you'll remember last year there was a lot of faith heading into that game because Purdue got Notre Dame at home. They were coming off of a bye week, thought they were going to be really healthy. And the previous Saturday, Notre Dame had gotten beat on their home turf by Northern Illinois. What happens next week? I don't think I need to recite the score or, go back and give a play-by-play of how that game went, but certainly not the way a lot of people had thought or had hoped. So going into this game, I think there's going to be that same level of energy on the Notre Dame side. Like their schedule right now, I don't think is beefy enough to maybe get them back in the college playoff conversation, especially since they don't have a conference championship game that they can play in. But they're certainly eliminated if they don't beat Purdue this weekend. You can't go, even if they were to win out after Purdue, you can't go 9-3 and expect to make the college football playoff. It is 10-2 or better in order to get into that field, right? So this is a must win for them. On the other side of the field, Purdue started off the season really well, 2-0, beat Ball State 31-0. Then they have a nice win over Southern Illinois, 34-17. Things kind of started rough in that game. And look, I'll tell you right now that the USC game, man, the game of missed opportunities, right? Purdue gets into the red zone 5 times. They're only able to convert twice, 3 turnovers, and Purdue loses that game 33-17. Even if you're able to come away with field goals, if you get 3 field goals, and remember one of those interceptions thrown by Ryan Brown was a pick 6 by Jamal Jarrett, the defensive lineman for USC. I'm trying to do quick math in my head. That gives Purdue 26, and that takes a 7 spot off the board for USC. So all of a sudden, even if you just get field goals, then you're looking at a 26-26 game, if my math is correct on that. Who knows how the rest of that game turns out, right? So Purdue obviously needs to clean up some of the errors. They need to be more efficient and more effective in the red zone. I don't think anybody is arguing that. But I think when you watched the USC game and you gave an assessment, you saw that Purdue was able to move the ball down the field. They ran some trick plays. I think the one thing that there's probably a lot of things. There's a couple things that you're not happy about coming out of that game. They weren't really able to establish the run. I think Devin Mockabee had an okay game. The offensive line just like that USC defensive line is really good. Devin Mockabee just could not really get into a rhythm that game. Ryan Brown was sacked 5 times. USC had 10 tackles for loss. They had 4 more quarterback hurries. They were living in the backfield. So those were some concerns. And then obviously the turnovers were a concern as well. So looking ahead to this week, I'm intrigued by this game, not just because it's the Notre Dame-Purdue rivalry game. And as I've already said, it's something that means a little bit more. This game's elevated to me just because I've always loved this game. I went to the game a lot growing up, and to me, it was such great battles, with those Drew Brees teams and Notre Dame teams. Just always a lot of fun. But what's intriguing to me is obviously you've got Notre Dame that has come back down to earth a little bit. They were thought to be a top 10 team, and I don't think that's the case anymore. You have a Purdue team that people thought are better than expected, and now coming off of a loss, how do they respond after coming off that loss? Because, again, I think there are a lot of positives you can take away from that game. They moved the football down the field. They got themselves in really good position. The second half, they did not allow an offensive touchdown from and USC is the second highest scoring team in the country. Now, I know that a lot of that came from Missouri State and Georgia Southern, but nonetheless, this is a team that also they had a ton of big plays. I think it was maybe 8 plays over 20 yards, if I remember correctly. I apologize for this. I should have the stats laid out and in front of me, but I try to go a lot of this off of memory, just because I feel like it's more authentic that way. I believe it was 8 plays for over 20 yards. It was a bend but don't break defense type of day. And I know it's 33 points, but if you were to ask Barry Odom and say, hey, your defense is only going to give up 26 points in this game, he'd have signed up for that in a heartbeat. And you think you've got a legitimate shot to win. And they would have. The pick 6 was costly. The other 2 red zone turnovers were incredibly costly. So I'm interested to see. I think what the coaching staff is talking about, obviously you want to address some issues. You need to be able to block better. You need to be able to pass protect better. You need to be able to make better decisions and not turn the football over, especially when you're in those scoring situations. I actually think this coaching staff is going to draw on the positives of this game and use that as encouragement to say, hey, look, guys, we're right there. The scoreboard may say we lost by 16 points, but 1 or 2 plays go our way, and this is an entirely different game, and we're sitting 3-0 and we're 1-0 in the Big Ten. And so I think they're going to draw on a lot of those positives heading into this weekend's game. And that's what makes me really intrigued by this because, again, it's another big spread. Notre Dame opened as 26.5-point favorites. I think that line's down to about 23.5 now. And maybe it's dropped a little bit more. I don't know. But Notre Dame is still getting 4 touchdowns, or at the very least 3 touchdowns in this game, but between 3 and 4 touchdowns in this game. And I'm here to tell you, this is a completely different Purdue team than we saw a year ago. Notre Dame may win this game, but they're not going to win it by 4 touchdowns. This is a team with too much heart and too much fight. And that's a credit to Barry Odom. That's a credit to everybody on his staff. That's a credit to the players who have bought into this system, who were 1 year ago. And I know a lot of them are gone, but this was a program, again, that 1 year ago was 1-11. So Purdue's obviously lost 9 straight to Notre Dame. They haven't won this game since 2011. It's been really, really lopsided. How does Purdue go to Notre Dame and sneak out a victory? And if they can't get a victory, at the very least, how do they stay competitive? Well, I think I've already talked about it. And I think actually the biggest key in this game, well, let me backtrack here a little bit. I think there are 2 really big keys in this game. Number one, you have to get better play from your offensive line. Notre Dame cannot live in the backfield. Now, what I will say is I don't know that Notre Dame's defensive line is as talented and as, I don't want to say aggressive because I think they're equally as aggressive, but I don't know if they're as skilled at getting to the backfield. Now, there's some unknowns here because obviously, again, Notre Dame played a top 10 Miami team, a top 10 Texas A&M team that have physical offensive lines. But through 2 games, Notre Dame has just 1 sack and 5 or 6 tackles for loss. Can Purdue keep Notre Dame out of the backfield? Because if they're able to do that and they give Ryan Brown time, when he has time to throw the football, he's been really good. But he was under so much duress last week that I think it got to his head a little bit. I think he was thinking about the hits a little too much, and that maybe caused a couple of those red zone turnovers that he had in that game. I mean, even one of them, the pick 6 was basically as he was being sacked and decided to try to get rid of it rather than just tucking it and taking the sack and maybe leaving it up to Spencer Porath to try to get you 3 points. So that's key number one, because if you're able to block, then I think you're going to create a path for Devin Mockabee. And I think Devin Mockabee is going to be huge in this game, or needs to be huge in this game. Let me rephrase that. If you create opportunities for Devin Mockabee to run the football and be effective, he doesn't have to have 100 yards. This doesn't have to be like Southern Illinois where he rushed for 126 yards and had 2 touchdowns and they put him in the quote-unquote mock cat and did all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be that way. If he's able to get 15 to 20 touches and he can get you 75 to 80 yards and maybe catch a pass or 2 out of the backfield just to keep the defense off balance, I think that's going to be good enough. But you have to get good run blocking. You can't let Notre Dame's defensive line and their linebackers get into the backfield and cause chaos. You saw what happens in those situations last week. If you're in first or second and you get behind schedule, first, obviously 1st and 10, but if you get into 2nd and long, 3rd and long, then you're going to have to throw the ball. And obviously Purdue had to throw the ball a lot because they were playing from behind all game long. So that was a factor there as well. So Purdue needs to try to keep it close, win the battle in the trenches so they can establish the run. And I think that would relieve a lot of the pressure in terms of their pass blocking. It would open things up down the field because Purdue did not stretch the field really at all. They did some good things in the intermediate passing game, but I can only remember Ryan Brown taking one real deep shot. I think it was to Armad Branch, but he took the one I remember was to Armad Branch and it wasn't catchable. It was way over his head. Which, if you're going to make a mistake, right, if you're going to launch it downfield, don't underthrow. It's better to overthrow it where nobody can get it. So I want to see Purdue be able to establish the run game because that's going to open things up down the field. You have a really good running back in Devin Mockabee. And I thought it was interesting, too. There were some complaints that Josh Henson didn't incorporate Mockabee into the game plan enough last week. I don't think that's true. I think they wanted to incorporate him more, but they got into a position where they had to throw the football. And they also had a lot of trouble blocking USC's defensive line. So I think it was more circumstantial than it was we just didn't get him enough carries. I think they maximized his effort in that game, and they just couldn't keep USC out of the backfield. And then when you're playing from behind, especially in the second half, you're going to have to throw the football and try to make plays that way. So that to me is a big key. You need Devin Mockabee to get you 80 yards. He needs to be a threat. That's going to open up some other things down the field and maybe allow Ryan Brown to take more than one chance. Maybe you get 3 or 4 opportunities where you can hit Michael Jackson, Nico Tuggle, or Armad Branch down the field. I think another thing that has become I don't want to hit the panic button yet, and I'll give my explanation behind this in a second. It's time for Purdue to get a takeaway. 3 games in, you haven't forced a turnover. They had some opportunities against USC, but weren't able to take advantage. And I think what you learn from that game is when you're playing a really skilled opponent and a team that can control the game offensively, you have to create more opportunities for yourself. And they just weren't able to do that last week. They've got to get turnovers this week. And they're playing against a young quarterback. CJ Carr is the prime target for Purdue to get 1 or 2 interceptions, maybe a sack fumble, something like that. He's obviously 2 games in. He's played against some big time opponents, and he's performed well. But he's also going to still be feeling the pressure, and that 0-2 start is only magnifying the pressure, right? Because when you're 0-2, coaches are looking to change just basically anything that they can to try to win football games. So I'm not saying he has a short leash or anything like that, or that he should be substituted out. But when you're a freshman and you're the quarterback and you're 0-2, all of a sudden do you start to feel the pressure like, hey, if we don't win this game, they might make a change. So this is a game where you have to get, I think, at least 2 takeaways if you want to have a shot to win this game. I haven't read too much into the turnovers yet, and you're going to have to get them to win Big Ten games. But the reason I hadn't is because, and I don't have any scientific evidence or any statistical data to back this up, but I feel pretty comfortable saying this. It seems to me that teams and defenses that focus on forcing turnovers, it seems like they have a real tough time tackling. And I think that's because when you see teams that are trying to constantly force turnovers, and the best example I have of this is Indiana under Tom Allen when he was just the defensive coordinator in 2000, that would have been 16, I believe. Indiana forced, I think they had the Big Ten's most turnovers that season. They struggled to tackle people. And you saw that at times throughout his tenure at Indiana. They really struggled because they focused so much on turnovers. And when you're not able to get those turnovers and you can't rely on your tackling, that's when things really start to unravel. And you saw that later in his tenure. So I think the positive thing is that obviously this coaching staff, Mike Shearer and Barry Odom, both obviously defensive-minded guys, have put a heavy, heavy emphasis on tackling, getting the ball to the ground, and not allowing a 4-yard gain to turn into an 8-yard gain or a 7-yard gain to turn into a 25-yard gain, right? You're going to have mishaps all the time. You're going to have missed tackles from now and then. Just the game of football. But I think for Purdue to be able – Purdue's defense has proven it can get guys to the ground, but to be able to win games like this, you have to force turnovers. There's just no other way around it. So this is the game where you have to start forcing those turnovers, right? And so I think those are a couple big keys. One thing that's really interesting to me is obviously defensively, you're going to have to shut down their running game too. Jeremiah Love has been a really good player for Notre Dame. Jadarian Price, another good running back. They've got a really good 1-2 punch. Purdue's defense is going to have to be at its best to keep those guys in check because not only do they run the football well, at least Jeremiah Love, he's a good player he can catch the ball out of the backfield and provide a lot of weapons, or be a weapon in multiple facets of the game for them. Another guy I'd keep an eye on is Eli Raridan, who is a tight end who has been extremely effective on first down. If I'm Purdue, I am trying to take that away. Now he's had, I think, 9 catches for 100-some yards, 170-some yards. He's their top pass catcher. 5 of those for 155 yards have come on first down plays. So he has been super effective in those situations. And I'm sure that I'm not saying anything that the Purdue coaching staff doesn't already know. So that's just another element of this game that I'm going to, and that I think is going to be important. And then the final thing to me, and there's a lot of different things I could talk about. One thing I'll mention here before I get to my final point is, by the way, like Jack McAllister, 52.3 yards per punt. He's been the Big Ten's best punter. He had a 68-yard punt last week. Just phenomenal. Spencer Porath, 4 of 4 on his field goals, 10 of 10 on PATs. James Shebist has done a really, really good job with his special teams unit. And for a team that has a minimal margin of error, special teams can win you a game or two down the road. And I think Purdue's going to be in some tight ball games this year. I really do. And so I think flawless special teams play, which is what they've had so far, is critical. The final thing that I think is really important in this game, and again, I'm not saying anything that you don't already know or Purdue doesn't already know, is getting up the field on 3rd and 4th down. Mike Shearer said this. He was asked basically not creating turnovers is that your biggest issue? And he said, no, it's not getting up the field in 3rd and 4th down. And 3rd down, they've been okay. I think teams have had a success rate of about 35, 36% so far this season. So not terrible. You'd probably like that to be closer to about 30%, but nonetheless, I think that's still in that ballpark. Given this defense, I think that that's an okay number. But the problem is on 4th down, teams have converted 6 out of 8 times, and that's not a good number. That's 75%. Got to get Notre Dame off the field in those situations. And then the final thing, I know I said I was just about done, but my mind wanders, and you just have to live with it. So, but the final thing is, much like USC, even though they haven't shown it yet, Notre Dame's defense can be very opportunistic. We saw that last year with some of their players. This is a defense that can make you pay for mistakes, especially in the secondary. And so Ryan Brown is going to have to be on target with his throws. He can't be lackadaisical. He can't be trying, I don't want to say not force things in there, because I think you're going to have to take some risks in this game. If you want to beat a really good opponent, if you're Purdue, you're going to have to take some risks, but they need to be smart risks, in my opinion. So it's not that Purdue can't turn the football over, but you got to keep it to a minimum, because I think that comes with risk taking. But they will make you pay. You can't get lackadaisical with the football. You can't do what you did against USC. If you're getting sacked, you can't just throw the ball up. And there were I think there could have been a few other plays where Purdue had turnovers in that game. So just keep that to a minimum. But other than that, I think Notre Dame probably has the upper hand. I think in terms of the skill players, I think they have the upper hand in this game. But look, we've seen Purdue fight through 3 games. Like, this team doesn't quit when they're ahead, when they're down. It's been such a change from last season. And I don't care if Purdue doesn't win another game, if they go 2-10, the way they've played, and I think the way they're going to continue to play, it's such a night and day difference. Now, I do think Purdue's going to win more games. I've said it before. I think they're going to get to 5 wins heading into that Old Oaken Bucket game, and boy, wouldn't that be a lot of fun. But, this is just another game where I think Purdue's going to scrap and claw and find a way to make this a game. And it's going to be fun because it's going to be their first road test. Does that excite them? Does that give them some optimism? Are there going to be some nerves there? Do they just not care? I'm intrigued to see what this team can do. And again, I think whatever the spread is, I think it's down to 23.5. It was 26.5 when it opened. I think that's way too many points. I think Purdue's going to keep this close. And I think they're going to be looking, as much as Notre Dame's going to be looking to bounce back to get their first win of the season and avoid an 0-3 start, I think Purdue is just as eager to get back on the winning track, 2-1. I think Notre Dame does win this game, but again, I think Purdue fans are going to be encouraged by what they see on the football field on Saturday. Again, kickoff is at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, and it'll be available as if you're purchasing something. It will be aired on NBC and Peacock. I want to thank you all. I did not do my introduction. I completely forgot about this. I realized I had not done this podcast since until late in the day. So you can probably tell it's kind of dark. And I can tell too, just not to get off topic too much, but it looks like my glasses are completely off balance here. Crooked would be the word. And I just can't figure out how to fix them. So, stick with me on that. But my name is Dustin Schutte. I am the writer and publisher at Purdue Boilermakers on SI. This is the Boiler Banter podcast. I thank you so much. You can check out all my content, si.com/college/Purdue. You can find me on Twitter at SchuteDustin. Really looking forward to this game. And we'll talk more about the results next week, but it should be a fun one in South Bend. Purdue and Notre Dame renew their rivalry. It should be a fun one. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you next time.